Okay, let's talk about the possible values that can be on the right side of our key value pairs. We've already seen in the last node that our keys can reference primitive data types like numbers, booleans, and strings. But they can also represent more complex chunks of data in the form of objects and arrays. That's right, a key can point to other nested objects or arrays of other objects. Let's take a look at our shoe example again. You might suspect that the style key maps to a nested object because the contents are enclosed in curly braces. And you'd be right. Okay, so the value is a nested JSON object. Well, how do I traverse it? Well, if you look at its contents, it just continues the same key value pair structure. You can read it the same way you did before. This time, we're just one level deeper. So let's look at the key categories. It has a value that starts with a left bracket, has contents, and then closes with a right bracket. What do you think the brackets represent? This is the syntax for an array. JSON arrays can contain primitive data types or JSON objects. Similar to arrays that you've seen in Java, you can navigate the contents of an array using indices. At the initial position, which is index 0, we have the string value of boot. At the following index position, index 1, we have winkle picker. Then we have a key color, which maps to the primitive string of black. That completes our example JSON describing a shoe. But as you can probably imagine, the nesting that we saw in the shoe example can continue to compound. That array could have contained more objects and arrays inside of it. And that means that the data payload could get really, really big. And that's absolutely true. But the cool thing is, despite the potential size, we've got a dead simple way to navigate through it. We just need to follow the key value pairs. Not sure what I mean? In the next node, we'll explore more complex examples and get more practice traversing a larger JSON payload. But first, let's get some practice identifying different JSON components in a quiz. In the next quiz, you'll get to practice distinguishing between a JSON object, array, or primitive by looking at a completely different JSON response. This is an example from the Twitter API where you can request the most recent tweets that a user has liked. This is the URL we query for the data, and the response comes back in JSON format. It does require authentication, which means you need to provide a username and password to access the data. You can't just copy the URL into a browser and see the results like we did for the earthquake data. Without getting bogged down into the details of authentication, the documentation gives us an example request and an example response. This response looks similar to the JSON we looked at earlier. There are key value pairs, and some of the values are JSON objects with braces, and some of them are JSON arrays with the brackets. Other values you'll see in here include strings, booleans, numbers. Chris and I did our own query to this API and got back this response. For the quiz, look at this response and answer the questions. In this quiz, I've asked you about certain keys in the JSON response that we got back from the Twitter Favorites API. The link to my response and the original documentation site is below. Determine if the given key maps to a value that is a JSON object, a JSON array, or a JSON primitive.